Welcome to this meeting of Community Liaison. I'm Councillor. Good evening. I'm Councillor Sally Hanks and I'll be chairing this meeting this evening. Can I just do a few house rules? Can I remind everyone present that the meeting will be recorded via the internet and this recording archived for future viewing? Could I ask all participants to mute themselves when you're not speaking, please? And if a participant wishes to speak, can you raise your hand if I can see you, or possibly better to raise your hand with the yellow hand and I can see your yellow hand then coming up. Could we also please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording? And if any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they're addressing the committee, then they should let the chairman or democratic officer know. If you have a webcam and you have interference, you could try turning the webcam off, and this often helps. Okay, so if we move to agenda item 1, apologies for absence. Amy, I haven't got any. Have you got any, please?
I have received apologies from Dr. Howells for Pentleen Community Council, and I've also received apologies from Mr. David Reed from Llangarn Community Council, but his substitute, Mrs. Wilson, is with us this evening. I haven't received any apologies from the Vale of Glamorgan elected members.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of April. Are we all happy to have these as correct? Has anybody got anything to add?
Move the minutes.
Thank you very much.
Second.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, to receive declarations of interest under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do I have any declarations of interest here tonight, please? Can't see any hands, can't see anything. Stephen Griffiths, Councillor Griffiths.
Yeah, just to say that I'm twin-hearted and I've got dispensation. It's probably minor, but just to highlight that, just in case.
Okay, thank you. And then item number 4, police matters. Have we got Arabella Rees with us tonight?
Sorry, Chair. I had my name up, Chair. I have the same. I have the same issue as Councillor Griffiths. I'm a community councillor in Dennis Paris and Vale councillor, so I'm twin-hatted. But I have dispensation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Robertson. Right, moving back to Chief Inspector Arabella Rees. Could we have your report, please, and welcome this evening?
Yes, Chair, thank you for the invite this evening. I'm very grateful to everybody. So I've got a couple of updates. I'll just draw back on some of the actions I took from the last meeting to give an update on those. So there was a request off the back of the last meeting for me to share the new Chief Inspector, the new local policing inspector details. I provided that in a letter following the last meeting, so I would hope that everybody has received that. There was a point raised that there'd been a drop in police attendance at community council meetings as a consequence of the pandemic. A number of the councillors have been in touch with me to request attendance at their specific community council meetings, and I would hope that attendance has now increased, but I'd welcome any feedback when we come to any questions if that's not the case, in order that I can address it further with my colleagues. And then lastly, Councillor Wilson from Penarth last time referenced graffiti that was occurring in the Penarth area. So just a good news update to share with councillors. That graffiti, as we called it, as being the so-so graffiti, we've identified the person responsible. They have been into police premises for interview. They've admitted the offences and they're now being processed accordingly. So we would hope that we won't see a repeat of that in and around the Penarth area. However, for those of you who have been in Barry, specifically Barry Island, over recent days, you may have seen that there was quite a significant amount of graffiti on the island caused over the weekend. I would just like to give you some reassurance that we have identified the suspects. We are managing that appropriately, and the majority of that graffiti has now been covered up. So just some reassurance as a bit of an opener there. In terms of issues or updates since our last meeting, the data I'm going to refer to relates from the 1st of April through to the 30th of June of this year. So in that time span, we've received 259 COVID-related calls, so it's still representing a significant demand on policing resources, with 258 of those referring to breaches of COVID-related legislation, primarily antisocial behaviour. Overall crime is up 11% when you compare it with the data from last year, but I would ask, of course, that we recall that last year crime was absolutely not in its normal state because of the various civil restrictions that are in place. Importantly, even though I'm telling you that it's up, violence with injury is down, violence without injury is down, shoplifting is down, and actually the increases that we're seeing are around public order offences. That's not really a surprise to me, given that licensed premises hospitality is opening back up, and those are the sorts of offences that for us are ordinarily related to the nighttime economy. Similarly, we have seen residential burglaries creep back up again, but of course this time last year a lot of people were at home, whereas actually now homes are vacant more than they would have been during the civil restrictions. And I'm just going to come on to burglary as my first point in terms of this update moving forward. So we know that during the summer months we will traditionally see an increase in burglaries because of the warm weather. People leave doors open, they leave windows open, or leave them unattended. So just a message from myself back to those councillors operating in the community that when you're in discussions with your community, if you could reinforce the point about making sure that doors and windows are locked when they're not attended and valuables are not left on display, I'd be really grateful. I would like to convey a little bit of positive news. So where I've told you that burglary's been up in this last couple of months, there was a little bit of a spike in May. We actually charged one male suspect with 7 of those burglaries, and he's been remanded into prison and up for court today. I just haven't had the court result yet, but that was really positive news. Similarly, another prolific offender from the Vale has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison for a number of different acquisitive crime offences. So that was a bit of positive news. Similarly, when it comes to commercial burglaries, so that's burglaries relating to business premises, we had a little bit of a spike in the Penarth area over the last couple of weeks. I'm really pleased to tell you that we arrested 3 persons for that, and they're currently on bail for 11 offences. So the teams have had they've worked really hard over the last couple of weeks and achieved, as you have heard there, some really good results, notwithstanding that, of course, we'd prefer that those offences didn't happen in the first place. And that's why I opened this message with the crime prevention piece, which is absolutely where we want to be. Couple of other areas, road safety. So I'm in regular contact with our elected officials for the Vale of Glamorgan, and the issue of road safety has been raised to me a couple of times over some specific stretches of road and then more broadly across the Vale. So we've done some work to have a look at how does that appear on our systems. And what I would tell you is that we don't see in calls being reported to police the same issues that communities are sort of representing in their conversation with councillors. We really need to know about those issues. So if residents are seeing dangerous driving, if they are seeing those concerns, it's really important that they tell the police at the time that's happening, rather than waiting to have that conversation with councillors at the point that they see them, because we need to be able to respond appropriately and deal with the issue at that point in time. What that also allows me to do is, if I need to take steps to respond to that particular issue or a particular hotspot area, I need the evidence base to be able to say, actually, this is where some of those issues are coming, so I can invest the time and the resources into addressing that particular issue. However, notwithstanding the fact we haven't had the calls, we've had some great engagement with the community, setting up a number of different community speed watchers across the Vale. So the Corntown UNE community speed watch is doing brilliantly. They've done 7 sessions over the last couple of weeks. The Llyswerni group have also conducted a couple of sessions and are planning some more. And the St Bride's Major Ward have now set up their community speed watch, and they're starting to carry out some sessions. We are trying to set up some more around St Athens, East Aberthaw. So really keen and really want to get involved into this, but we just need those calls to allow us to actually be able to respond to the issue. And then lastly, you may recall on the last meeting I told you about Operation Elstree. That was our plan, our coastal policing plans for how we're going to face down the challenges that we're anticipating on our coastline during the summer months, especially with all the uncertainty around international travel and the potential that people may be doing more of staycations or travelling to our coastal area. So Operation Elstree is the policing response to the entire coastline between Cardiff Bay through to Ogmont by Sea, but work really closely with our blue light colleagues as well as the local authorities for Cardiff and for the Vale in order to face down challenges as and when they are appearing. So said that started on the 1st of May. So far, we've had lots of really good results, both in relation to that preventative element and the partnership work, but also from a policing perspective. We've had quite a lot of stop searches. We've been able to put in quite a lot of antisocial behaviour forms to nip problems in the bud before they occur. And we've also had a number of arrests because we've got additionality on the coast, and we've been able to get into issues before they become big issues, and we've been able to take those people out of the community. You may well have seen, if you've been on our coast in any of our busy days, that there's been a number of additional new looking policing assets there. So you may have seen the CCTV van. We've got one at Barry Island. We've also got one at Ogmore by Sea that allows officers to be able to remotely monitor locations through their work devices and being able to see the footage of what's going on wherever the van is, which allows us to have greater eyes along our coast, because I'm sure you'll all agree it's a really big area for us to be covering. So that's been great. We've done quite a lot of recommendation around the child safety bans. That's an RLNI initiative that we promote because we saw on the recent warm weekend about 2-3 weekends ago, Barry Island, we had 13 missing children on one day, notwithstanding the fact that any one of those children could go into the sea and find themselves in significant difficulty. The time that we're looking for those children, which is absolutely our highest priority at that particular time, to try and get them safely returned to mum and dad. Of course, there's other issues that we will not be looking at because missing child is absolutely going to be our priority, especially on the coastline. But as I said, we're getting ahead of issues. We're being able to find solutions as quickly as we reasonably can, and we're in a really good space with it. And really grateful to those blue light colleagues that we're working with for that multi-agency piece, able to really get the best people into the right places at the right time. So that's probably my update, and I really welcome questions or feedback, Chair.
Okay, thank you ever so much. That was a very positive report to start tonight on. Thank you. Do I have any questions, please, from any reps? I've got Councillor Bonner. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. I represent Llanfire Community Council, so St Hilary, Llandoff and St Mary Church. We've had 2 meetings since the last liaison meeting, and we haven't had any police representation at those or any reports submitted, so would appreciate you just following that through if that's okay.
Okay, would you be able to drop me contact details of,
of our clerk?
Yeah, we'll I'll make sure it gets to the right teams then.
No problem. Thank you, Chief Inspector.
Thank you. Councillor Weddell, please.
Yeah, hi. Actually, on exactly the same theme, I represent Cowbridge with Llanblethian Town Council, and we have also had no police representation for the last, oh my goodness, at least 5 meetings, and no report either. And it would be really helpful because we really value it. Thank you.
Okay, fab. If I can have the email, then I'll make sure that the teams are in contact and you have attendance at that meeting.
Of course, thank you very much indeed.
Councillor Barnaby, please.
Oh, hello. Yes, thank you very much for a very good report. Unfortunately, I'm going to add to the list St Athan Community Council. have not received anything either from a police report or an offer for a visit. So thank you.
Okay. Again, not a problem, send me an email. What I would say is these 3 community councils are ones that weren't ones who've been in contact with me since the previous meeting. So if you send those invites through, then I will make sure that they know and they respond to them.
Thank you. And I'll chase the clerk up because he was supposed to get in touch. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Going to the councillors now. Can I have Councillor Mark Wilson, your question, please?
Yeah, I'm just contacting my PCSO. I'm having real trouble contacting that PCO for Stanwell Ward. That one is called Leanne Morris. I have her mobile number. I left text messages, phone calls, and no responses back. And the other issue I'd like to talk about as well is the growing traffic issue on Lavernock Road, especially on Sunday morning, where cars are parked both sides, mostly illegally, and it's causing serious issues, not just the tailbacks, but also it means that cars almost hitting each other going opposite directions because it's now in the road. I have raised it with the Vale officers. They said to me that they will get people there, but I think it'd be helpful if the police are also monitoring the situation as well.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just confirm, was it Lavernock Road that you said the issue
That's
was?
right, Lavernock Road in Penarth, correct. But adjacent to the rugby pitches on both sides of that road.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. I can take that forward to the team. That's not a problem.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a question from Councillor Michael Morgan, please?
Oh, good evening, Chief Inspector. Thank you again for a very informative report, and it's nice to know that you've got your eye on it. But I'm sorry to add to the list of community councils that aren't getting reports. I'm awfully sorry about that. But in my ward, I have Pendoylan, Welch and Donnets, St George's and Peterson Super Really, and we haven't had reports lately. It would be useful if you could send somebody occasionally. But otherwise, thank you for looking after it. Thank you.
Not a problem at all. Fab, thank you. I could add you to the list.
And could we have Councillor Mike Cuddy, please?
Yeah, yes. Penarth Councillor. I just wondered, and we do get visits from the police, I'm glad to say, we're very, very helpful as well. I was just wondering, next meeting, I was contacted by a constituent today, and describing a situation which would ideally sort of lend itself to those sort of community discussions. Hello?
We can't hear you, Councillor Cuddy.
I'm sorry, Councillor Cuddy, you were breaking up then, so I'm not sure we quite got
okay, sorry about that. Okay, is that better? I'm nearer the.
Yes.
I was just asking about the resurrection if they've died of ACT meetings. There are situations here in my constituencies raised which ideally suit those sort of community discussions. Did you get that? Could you hear that?
You're referring to PACT meetings, is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yes, so they are mostly being held online now because of the issues with bringing people together and also not wanting to perhaps discriminate against persons who won't want to come out into those group settings at the moment with the changing face of the legislation. So, Councillor Cuddy, I think you said that you were Penarth. Let me find out the status of your specific PAC meeting and I can come back to you on that, because I'd have to just make sure, but I'm pretty sure yours is now on online forum.
Okay, thank you.
It'd be good if we get invited to those PAC meetings as well. Arabella, be really useful because we're not.
Okay, I'll find out how they're being advertised at the moment, because of course they're advertised for the public to attend, so you'd be more than welcome to invite yourselves along and come, but let me find out, because I'm not sure how we're approaching that, because we've stood them back up in stages as opposed to being all at once. So let me find out on it. I don't hesitate to guess.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy. Can I ask Councillor Carroll to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Chair. sense of repetition here, Arabella. Lambeth Community Council, I know, haven't had a police representative for some time, so just asking on their behalf, really, if you would be able to update on that.
Okay, not a problem. You're added to my list.
Thank you.
Thank you. And could I have Councillor Sandra Perks's question, please?
Oh, thank you, Chair. I wanted to just ask a little bit about the system that you said was in place on Barry Island for keeping children safe. Is it some sort of thing where the parents sign up the children when they get to the island? How does it work exactly? And also, I'm twin-hatted. I'm on Barry Town Council, and we have had representation from the police.
Good, some positive news. I like that. So in relation to the child safety bands that I mentioned, this is an RLNI endorsed scheme, but then we promote it. Essentially, parents can, when they arrive at the island, they can either go to the RLNI hut that's at the top, or most of the traders also support the scheme, and they get given free of charge, get given a small band that can be attached to the children's wrists, and on the inside of the band contains mum and dad's contact details, which allows, in the event that the child becomes lost, but we find the child and not the parents, because sometimes it's missing children, sometimes it's missing parents, it allows us to contact the parents to be able to say where we are. But similarly, if you get another Good Samaritans, perhaps child goes off with another group of children, it allows that group of parents to say that child doesn't belong to us, let's find mum and dad and ring them. So we have a lot of success with that. And if I sort of take on the fact that when we had that hot weather about 3 weekends ago, we had 13 missing children reported in one day. Since that time, even though it hasn't been as hot weather, the island is extremely busy. We haven't had missing child reports through because we're able to get to it really, really quickly. And of course, mum and dad don't get anywhere near as stressed then when we're able to get in contact just that quickly.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Perry, could I have your question, please?
Oh yeah, we're another community council, St Nicholas and Bolton, that's not had a visit recently from the PCSO, but I have had my figures about half an hour ago, so I've got my figures, but I do have to chase them up all the time. I do go online. I think PAC meetings were good, not that I've ever been to one, but I do go to the police website, which is supposed to tell me who my PCSO and police officer is. But when I go around, it's hard to find, and the information there is out of date, and there are PCSOs that are no longer in the service and they're still listed. Is there any chance of getting that website updated?
Is that the main South Wales Police website?
Yeah, so if you look at Wenvo War, for example, you should find who your current PCSO is, and the person we've got retired, I think, in 2019. So it's way out of date.
Oh dear, that's not ideal. I will speak to corporate communications and ask them to run the check against who we've got for each ward area to make sure that the information is up to date.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have got a lot of yellow hands up. I think a lot of them could be historical. If you can lower your yellow hand would be helpful, or if you've got another question, you can leave it there. Can I ask Councillor Cave, please, to ask her question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just really the problem we have in the Landau UNE ward. I'm just raising this because obviously we do get a report, but we haven't seen our PCSO for well, a considerable length of time, and I know how much the community councils value seeing her. So it would be great if we could instigate some visits. They are all at the moment on Zoom. So that's for Landau Community Council, UNE Community Council, Colwinston Community Council, and Clangarn Community Council.
I mean, what I would say is that, of course, the officers can't always attend because it is subject to operational extinguishment of duty, and also the fact them actually being on duty at the time that these meetings take place. I wonder, Chair, because there's quite a lot of these coming through, I wonder if perhaps a list could be compiled of everywhere that's not seeing the representation they would want at the moment, and perhaps the clerk's contact details for that particular council group, because then I can do one email out and start that conversation, save taking up your time here.
Yeah, that's fine. We'll sort that out for you. Is that okay, Amy?
Absolutely, Chair. Yeah, no problem at all.
Okay. Right, I think, can I just check with Councillor Carroll? Did you know her hand has gone down? So I think that's all the questions that have now been asked. And I can just thank you ever so much, Chief Inspector, for coming with such positive news. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me, and well, I'll see you all next time.
Yes, we shall look forward to it. Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 5. Fire and rescue. We have Christian Hadfield, please. I'm sorry you had difficulties last month. Oh, not last month, in the last meeting, but it's good to see you here tonight. So can I pass it over to you, Christian, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair, for the invite tonight, and apologies for my my last non-show. Had a couple of ICT issues, so a big apologies for that. So I'll take you through 2 parts of this really. Is one, I'll give you an update on the performance of Vale Glamorgan in terms of fire-related statistics. And I'll just touch on some of the key work streams that we're opening back up now as a fire rescue service that are also directly linked to the Vale Glamorgan. So just for those on the call, just as a reminder, when I talk about the Vale Glamorgan and the fire stations, I'm referring to Cowbridge Fire Station, Lantwit Emergency Services Station, Penarth Fire Station and Barry Emergency Services Station. And I'm responsible for the Vale Glamorgan and the Bridge End. So I'll touch on first of all, the statistics for the area. These are what we call our headline ones, or our key indicators as a service. So for the Vale Glamorgan, when we look at accidental dwelling fires from previous year 2020 to this year 2021, accidental dwelling fires are on the decrease, which is very pleasing. So previous years with 59, this time round we're now at 53. Obviously with COVID, we were concerned initially as a service that people were spending more time at home and we could potentially see a rise in domestic dwelling fires. But that luckily hasn't been the case, as we've managed to keep going with our community safety work in terms of doing home safety checks and delivering alongside that with smoke detectors to the most vulnerable. So we like to think that people's responsibility for fire and also our work for prevention has kept that figure low during COVID. So that's a real success story for us. Our grass fires for the Vale Glamorgan are pretty much similar to those the previous year, 36 previous year, 39 this year. No significant changes there for us. They are quite low figures in the grand scheme of South Wales. So in terms of how it balances out with the rest of the service, it's actually very low as a unitary authority. So again, very pleasing. Road traffic collisions, these are the figures I'm going to give you now is where we've attended. These aren't the overall road traffic collisions in Vale Glamorgan. This is only where we've been requested to attend by either police, ambulance or other agency to help people to be extricated from their vehicles. So again, no real surprises for us on this, that these figures are well down. We sort of hover around about the 100 mark for Vale Glamorgan. We're at the moment around about 57. I think obviously the majority of that is during lockdown where we had restrictions on travel. Now that's opening back up. We'll be interested to see how that pans out. But as Chief Inspector Rees just mentioned there, we do work very closely with our blue light partners in terms of reducing road traffic collisions and doing a lot of preventative work. We've been continuing that for many years now with great success. And again, for the Vale Glamorgan, this is a very good figure in comparison to the remainder of the service. So again, very good statistic. Flooding calls and water rescues. Flooding calls, we are up on our flooding calls. That's mainly due to the incidents we had before Christmas. And that is hand in hand with a number of rescues, with water rescues. Now, they're not directly linked to flooding, because we've also got the statutory duty for inland water rescue, so places like Cardiff Bay, for example, and Barry Docks. So yeah, our flooding calls run about 43 at the moment, in previous years with 39. Water rescues up quite considerably from 8 previous years to 18. but that's very seasonal and very weather related. The one I wanted to draw your attention to tonight really was the refuse fires. We've seen a dramatic increase in the Vale of Glamorgan, which is the highest across our service area. We sort of, in previous years, we had 97 refuse fires. So that can be those people that are burning rubbish in their back gardens, to those setting fire to bins and pretty much everything in between. This time round, we're 163, which is quite a significant rise, considering 131 of those have been put back as deliberate. These are put back, the cause of incidents are put back by our fire crews on the scene, or if we need to, fire investigators. So 131 deliberate, 31 accidental and 1 unknown. We've, with regards to this statistic itself, or this performance indicator, we've doing a lot of work with our colleagues in South Wales Police and in local authority as well. We think this is linked very heavily back in first lockdown, where we were unable to, people were unable to get to the utility sites or the recycling areas because they were closed. And it may attribute to the fact people have to now sign up as well or book an appointment. So we feel there's probably a link there. Since we've been, Barry and Penarth crews in particular have been working with local authority and police, we've seen a dramatic fall from this. We've also seen some areas in Barry where we've had a lot of fly tipping and where that fly tipping has been set fire to. So it's still work in progress, but looking at the recent statistics this morning, these are now on the decline. What we're also doing is we're doing some call challenging from our fire control team, which are based in Bridgend Police Station, whereby we're now challenging those who are putting the calls through, or those people are putting calls through to say they're having control, what we used to call control burns. Now, controlled burns are where people are having a bonfire in their back garden. What it's not is to burn recycling or to burn rubbish. It's simply to burn vegetation. So we're trying to get that message out there now to communities all of Wales that any controlled burn now is not plastics and household rubbish. It is only vegetation which is grown in your own garden. So I think with all the work that's going on in this area, we should see quite a good decline and back to a normality. But I will certainly keep this group updated on that particular statistic or that performance indicator. So that's the key headlines of what we're doing at the moment. With regards to Vale of Glamorgan, just give you some update really on where we are on COVID. So we are really proud now to say that we are opening back up our services to full demand. One of the key ones for us in the Vale of Glamorgan, certainly for me, which I got a very close link to, is our fire cadet program, which is really important to us. Unfortunately, we had to suspend that during COVID. We couldn't work out a workaround at all to get our kids back on station and back into the program without going face to face. It was felt that using video conferencing and etc. just wouldn't really work because it's very practical. However, we've now made a decision to reopen the cadet program. We're going to be commencing this now in September. And to assist our new cadets in getting familiar with the program, we've opened up 3 Keeping in Touch events, which were taking place in Barry Emergency Services Station this month. And this will allow our cadets to familiarise themselves with the station, the cadet instructors, and obviously the crews, allow them to start participating in some team building exercise in readiness for September. So that's a really good success news story for us, that we are now getting back in with our cadet program. And similarly with that, our school visits, our key stage 1 and 2 visits were obviously very seriously affected during COVID. We did offer virtual talks, which were taken up by some schools, but not others. We are now looking to get back into schools now and start delivering face-to-face Key Stage 1 and Key Stage 2, because that is a really important area for us in terms of fire prevention and fire behaviour education. So even though we're still doing some virtual talks, we're now starting to open up and getting back into schools. And not just schools, but our engagement programme itself, our engagement with the communities is really, really important to us. It's how we get strong fire behaviour messages across. So that is something now which we're full steam ahead, really, getting back into. of course in line with schools' risk assessments. And I guess the last one really to update you on is we held a large-scale rail incident exercise. I'll just reiterate that exercise on Saturday, 26th of June. That was the piece of land behind Barry Railway Station. We do this quite a lot within South Wales. We host some large-scale multi-agency exercises to test our capability as a service, but more importantly, test our capability as emergency services. Both myself and Chief Inspector Rees were at that incident or that exercise, and it was a simulated derailment of a train with multi-casualties, declared major incident and multiple scenes. We were there for the full day. So this is our response to a rail incident involving a number of scenarios, and basically, like I said, it was to test our capability. So we tend to program these types of exercising quite often. The next two for the Vale of Glamorgan, one will be a large-scale water exercise in Barry Dock. We did a bit of a test back in December that went very well. So now we're looking at a larger scale. And of course, we will be doing a large-scale Cardiff Wales Airport exercise for aircraft, which we do on a very regular basis with Cardiff Airport and St Athan Aerodrome. So that's pretty much where we are as a service at the moment. I'm more than happy to take questions. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. It sounds like you've had a busy time, and it's really nice to hear how much you're involving the youth as well. So thank you very much. Do I have any questions from anybody, please? No, it's looking quiet. I can't see any yellow hands anywhere. So thank you very much, and I'm glad your IT was good tonight.
Yes,
so
very good, Touchwood.
Thank you ever so much for your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you. Going on to agenda item 6, we have Tom Bowring taking this report of the Glamorgan Public Service Annual Report. Can I just say, Tom, that when you finish, I think I'd like to ask Councillor Mike Cuddy to speak if he wishes to first, because he's got another appointment this evening with One Voice Wales's AGM. So I'll hand over to you, Tom, please.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. This is the annual Public Services Board report for 2020-21. Colleagues will remember that I've been bringing this for a couple of years now to Community Liaison Committee for your information. The report sets out the work that the statutory partners and invited participants, of which town and community councils are one, have made in the year. The PSB saw this report at its meeting on Friday of last week and approved the report. It's now going through the various organisations that make up the PSB, such as Fire and the Police, who you've just heard from, and it's going to be considered by the Vale of Glamorgan Council's Cabinet later on in July. So the reason for bringing it here is for your information, but also that if you've got any comments that you'd like to make to the Cabinet, that you've got the opportunity to do so. The report, Chair, is written reflecting back on an exceptional year for partnership working, both in terms of tackling the pandemic, but also in progressing the priorities that the PSB set out for itself. And you'll remember from last year, committee, that the PSB set itself 4 priority areas: the Move More Eat Well plan that Public Health and the UHB are taking forward, climate change, time banking and engagement. And you've just heard from Chris from Fire, and he's been taking forward that engagement work, and he was describing the work that they've been doing with young people. So the report, which you can access online, and I'd encourage town and community council colleagues to share the report with residents as far as you can, because it does set out significant progress. It's illustrated by a series of case studies, including work that was done in response to the pandemic, but also a variety of different areas, such as children's community safety, the terrific partnership between community groups, Glamorgan Voluntary Services and the local authority, the work that's underway in Llantyre Major around food poverty, of which I'm grateful for Councillor Thomas's support from Llantyre Major Council, as well as some funding that Natural Resources Wales have provided the PSB to take forward a range of projects. The report also illustrates some statistical evidence for the decisions that the Public Services Board makes, and this might be useful and interesting for town and community councils to access, because it sets out a series of demographic information, education, employment, health, environment and transport information as well, which can be used for to help inform local decision making. The report finally sets out a proposal for the areas of focus for the coming year, Chair, which includes progressing to make the Vale Glamorgan more age-friendly and doing work with the Older Persons Commissioner for Wales, taking forward the work on climate change, which the PSB partners all signed up to a climate change charter during this year, preparations to undertake the wellbeing assessment, which is going out to find out and ascertain the state of wellbeing across the Vale of Glamorgan to help inform the future plan, which will be published in 2023, and also includes a commitment to strengthening the relationship with town and community councils, which is an area that the PSB had highlighted for last year but hadn't made progress that it was wished to. And in that regard, we held, as the PSB, a series of workshops over the last few weeks with town and community councils. And with your permission, Chair, I was just going to run through a couple of slides. And Mike and I did this at the PSB meeting on Friday. So if he'd be happy, perhaps we could do our double act that we did last week, if that's okay.
That's fine by me.
Okay, bear with me while I just bring these slides up now. Can I just check that colleagues can see the slides?
Yep, we can see them, Tom.
Tom, can I just know if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you, Mike.
It's breaking up again, I'm afraid.
We can hear you okay.
Okay, I'll speak as though, okay, fine.
Okay, so as I said, Chair, we ran a couple of sessions with town and community councils being invited to attend to explore how the PSB could strengthen the relationship between itself and town and community councils. It was really good to see the following town and community councils were able to attend. So the larger town councils, but also a series of community councils as well came along. And I don't know, Mike, whether perhaps you want to summarise the issues that arose, and then I can describe the response that the PSB agreed to on Friday.
Okay, I can do a longish one if you can hear me. Can you confirm you can?
Yes.
Okay. Well, background, of course, this is the first cycle of these plans, and the statutory partners had to get to know each other. I think it took a year or two, and also they had to start sharing budgets, because there is no separate budget except for the secretariat of the PSB. So you have to be quite inventive, and certainly for town and community councils, they can't offer in advance, money. So you have to be doubly inventive. As you might expect, as a consequence of being on the sidelines, the issues raised reflect that. So people didn't know about it, didn't understand it, too high level, yet on the other hand would like to be involved, and this is our attempt to try and move forward. There was willingness, and we felt there, out of discussions at the two meetings, issues raised which we could, I think, will provide a platform for some cooperative work. And I think that would be. I'll just look at this. Yeah, I think I've covered the issues on that page, Tom. If you go to the next one. Hello.
Great, thank you, Mike.
The way forward, yeah.
Yeah, so the PSB considered the feedback that that had been elicited from those conversations with colleagues from town and community councils, and suggested that it would be perhaps useful if the vice chair of the Public Services Board, who is Mark Brace from the police service, to chair 3 meetings a year to provide an update on the work of the PSB, but also to give an opportunity in a relatively informal setting for us to all collectively share ideas. There was some discussion around having some specific meetings or workshops on particular topics. So, for example, climate change, age-friendly status, so that we could bring representatives from different partners into those conversations to help inform them. There was also a discussion around requesting that we get in touch with all town and community councils to ask them to share information about any relevant current projects, any priorities that have been identified through local plans, or any results of engagement work undertaken. That would help inform the wellbeing assessment that will be underway now in the next 9 months. And there are some interesting examples that are listed on your screen here as well. And also, as Mike just mentioned, there is no dedicated budget for the PSB. It is about being creative and innovative, and there were some good ideas coming from town and community council representatives around potential areas that resource and knowledge sharing could be useful. So, for example, carbon literacy training, and whether we can, by joining up discussions better, be able to access funding opportunities through that kind of regular communication. So that was the way that the Public Services Board discussed and committed to trying to strengthen the relationship between the board and town and community councils. So the reason, as I said, Chair, for bringing the report is for information, so that your committee and town community councils are aware of the progress. To give an opportunity to make any recommendations via Cabinet to the PSB on any future areas of activity that as a committee you feel would be useful. And also then that you have an opportunity to consider the outcomes from those recent workshops and the proposed way forward in strengthening that relationship. So that's a really quick summary for you, Chair.
Can I just add a few points of importance, really? One is that we are interesting other members of the PSB in Natural Resources Wales, being in particular, could be a strong ally and maybe a source of money, although when asked they couldn't do carbon literacy. I've been active specifically on the 2 themes to make sure that were this to go forward, and I think it will, we could hit the ground running in identifying resources, particularly in climate change, where there is quite a lot of interest. One Voice Wales has just taken on the sort of administration of places for nature, and I know some of the communities in the Vale have already availed themselves of that. But that does provide a springboard and potential source of funds for collaborative work by big and small town council. And I hope to, in the first meeting, we could start to discuss that. The other, Age Friendly Vale, has the support of the Commissioner for Older People. And again, that provides a background where hopefully we could work cooperatively, and hopefully there'll be a bit of resource to work with. So that's my hope in taking those 2 streams forward, should they be agreed. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cuddy, for attending tonight and giving us that report. Tom, do you want to add anything, or shall I open it up to questions?
I haven't anything to add, thank you, Chair.
Okay. It is an interesting report. I enjoyed reading the case studies, and there does seem to be a lot of movements within it, and I hope we can all participate and drive it all forward. Do I have any questions from any representatives of town and community councils or our own councillors I have a question from Councillor Christopher Tatt.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I did read the report quite closely, and I was quite surprised at the comment on unemployment, page 5. Let me just quote. It says there's no specific employment implications arising as a direct result of this report. Well, given the COVID situation, it's had a devastating effect on business, shops, unemployment, all these economic factors, which I think were within the scope of the board. I'm surprised at that statement. Perhaps I misunderstand the work of the board, but I would have thought that given the situation we're in, hopefully now recovering from COVID, that would be a priority for the board.
Thank you, Councillor Tatt. It's an example actually just of the way that our committee reports are constructed. So where we talk about financial employment and financial employment and legal implications associated with the report, they're specific implications associated with the council. You're absolutely right in terms of highlighting the employment implications of the pandemic, and within the annual report itself, there's a link to the community impact assessment work that has been undertaken by the local authority on behalf of the Public Services Board that highlights the changes in general employment terms, whereas that section of the report is to draw members of the Vale Council's attention to specific employment implications for the local authority. So my apologies for it not being clear.
Okay, I think it would be useful if you could tell us what the impact of COVID has had on the Vale Council's income. I mean, leisure centres have been shut, businesses are closed, so council business tax and all these other taxes associated with employment are down. What has the effect has that been, and how does it implicate the future funds that Councillor Cuddy referred to?
I'm just going to drop into the chat a moment. Sorry, I'm trying to access the report for you. And what I'll do is I shall put a link into the chat, and perhaps a colleague from Democratic Services would also be able to email this around to the committee later on. The report that I've just sent you a link to is an update that we presented to the Council's Cabinet this afternoon in terms of an impact of coronavirus, an update as at the 23rd of June. That provides some high-level financial implications associated with the pandemic for the local authority. Cabinet also this afternoon on the agenda considered a series of financial monitoring reports, including the revenue monitoring report, that provides more granular detail in terms of the impact of the pandemic. And what I'll also do after the meeting is my team produce a monthly economic impact assessment report that we send to all our elected members of the Vale Council, as well as senior officials. That illustrates the month-on-month changes that are reported via the ONS. So what I could do is ask Democratic Services colleagues if we can share the latest one of that. That also provides you with links to a series of websites that provide the latest employment and other financial implications associated with the pandemic, and wherever possible, at the Vale of Morgan level.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just chip in, Tom, if you can hear me? There is the opportunity when the wellbeing assessment is developed to start to form slightly different objectives in the next plan, isn't there, Tom? And those concerns, I'm sure, will be echoed by many people who participate in this. And councils at our discussions were anxious to get in at the beginning to shape, to some extent, both the sort of data collected and, by implication, what objectives might come from it.
Mm. Absolutely.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddy.
Just to confirm, Chairman, we will obviously send those links as Tom has suggested. I'll make sure that gets out to all members. Okay.
Lovely. Thank you, Amy. Councillor Barnaby, can I have your question, please?
Yes, thank you very much again for the presentation. I think I brought this up before, but I just find sometimes these exercises are a little bit tick boxing, because unless we got engagement with all the different groups within the Vale of Glamorgan, particularly planning, to follow the well-being policy, to follow climate change, it is literally a tick box exercise. An example is that we've got all these houses being built in around the enterprise zone, but there's no actual promise of jobs. That's not going to help climate change, because they're all going to be commuting to where the jobs are. You know, it just needs to be a real joined up approach if we're going to do this as a really positive exercise. The other element as well is we should be actually putting pressure on the Welsh Government to ensure any jobs that are created are quite green, rather than their fixation with the aerospace industry and heavy industry. So unless we can address that, we're always going to struggle with actually achieving the goals of a lot of these policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Tom, did you want to come back in there?
I suppose just to say thank you, Chair, that what Mrs Barnaby raises is one of the examples around climate change, and is one of the themes that we would hope that we could take forward in this kind of workshop approach. And I think the PSB recognise that town and community councils have got a real contribution to make in the Vale of Glamorgan, and this is an opportunity and a mechanism to enable them to do so.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Shirley Hodges, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the report, Tom. It was very, very interesting. I suppose there's a couple of points I'd like to raise. As a Barry Town Councillor, I know there's very much a feeling within the Town Council that due to the size of the town, the numbers in the population, that the Town Council itself should have a representative on the Public Service Board. And the other point, in connection to the money that the Vale may have lost over the last year due to the COVID and the pandemic, my understanding is that the Vale has identified an extra £13 million to put into reserves. So rather than make any loss, it's identified quite a substantial sum that has been unspent and put into reserves. Is that correct? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges. In terms of addressing the first point, in terms of representation on the Public Services Board, the PSB, through the statute, has a series of statutory partners. There are also then invited participants, as I know, Councillor Hodges, you're aware, and town and community councils are one of the invited participants. The PSB is always mindful of ensuring that there's proportionate representation from the various different organisations, and it's been felt previously that having one representative from the town and community council sector means that the board has the right kind of balance across the various organisations. But what I'm hopeful of is, in terms of the 3 times a year meetings that would be chaired by the vice chair of the PSB, that gives a more regular opportunity for us to engage with town and community councils and identify areas of practice that we can take forward, either across the sector or indeed with individual town councils such as Barry. The second point that you raised in terms of the end of year finances for the authority, I'm not as au fait as my colleagues in finance would be on the end of year balance position, but I am aware that, as I say, the financial position was reported to Cabinet today, so those reports are in the public domain if you wanted to get any more information on them.
Lovely. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodges, for your question. And Councillor Mark Wilson, please, your question.
I'd just like to reiterate to Councillor Shirley Hodges and any other town and community council, there's nothing to stop people watching the scrutiny committees, and if they want to speak, they can do. So there's no harm in asking any of you to come along to any of our meetings, obviously remotely at the moment, but that'd be very helpful. We are discussing the closure of accounts at all the scrutiny committee meetings this week and next week, so you're very welcome to come along. And actually, I would welcome a view from town and community councils there, because I think it is vital that you have an input. I mean, I do feel that the Public Service Board is very overarching, as we know. It's very difficult to get every representative to come from town and community councils to this meeting. But yes, I do take your point, Shirley, about perhaps, you know, some of the bigger councils like Penarth, like, you know, like Clanwick, like Cowbridge, and maybe a representative from some of the community councils could come along to those meetings. I also think perhaps we could look into the feasibility, I'm saying feasibility, of perhaps inviting councillors to come along to Public Service Board live meetings as attendees, and possibly to give them certain rights, if possible. But again, it's about managing the process, isn't it? And I'd be interested in Tom's views in what I've just said.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Absolutely, in terms of town and community councils' participation in registering to speak at scrutiny committees, I know you're always keen to hear from a variety of different stakeholders as part of your scrutiny committee and of scrutiny more widely. In terms of the attendance at PSB meetings, I think that's an interesting one for us to perhaps explore in one of our first workshops with town and community councils, because I can definitely see the kind of value that if we had a conversation and there was some interest, for example, from town and community councils in doing some work on something like age friendly or climate change, and we came up with a bit of a proposal or a plan, it might be very, very useful to invite a number of colleagues from town and community councils to attend a board meeting to present that item and have a discussion with the PSB partners as to how we could put that into practice. And I think that would be a really good example of how we could work in partnership with the PSB without getting into the territory of there being disproportionate representation from any one particular sector or organisation. So I'd be very happy if people would like us to explore that kind of approach to looking to take that forward. I think that's really constructive.
I agree with that, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Some good ideas there, and I think it would, you know, there'd be more involvement, wouldn't it, and input to feedback to all our communities. Councillor Paula Wilson, please. Councillor Wilson, have you got your hand up? We can't hear you. Are you muted? Yeah, you're still muted. There we go.
Hello, thank you. Paula Wilson, Glengarn, Trowson, Maryhill. A slightly different angle on this, not about committee participation. But I think from my perspective, climate change is something that everybody is thinking about. I mean, I'm talking as an individual in the Vale. And I know for a fact that in our village, many people would like to know more about Vale initiatives. And by that I mean somebody coming from the Vale of Glamorgan one evening and talking to the village, because a very big question for villagers at the moment is, what can I do as an individual? So I'm taking this right down to the absolute basics of what can I do as an individual to assist my community and climate change. Is there any initiative ultimately from this review which would lead to this sort of initiative?
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Absolutely. The Public Services Board signed up to a climate change charter, so all partners have committed to a series of steps. the Vale of Glamorgan Council, this afternoon, the Cabinet approved our climate change plan, which is called Project Zero. Again, what I'll do is I'll pop in the chat for this message, for this meeting, and also ask Democratic colleagues to circulate the link to that. And absolutely, I mean, we'd be delighted to have a conversation with any town or community council around climate change, and I think doing that as part of one of these workshops would be really useful. And it is interesting the point that you raised, Councillor, about people wanting to know what they can do as an individual. I spent a couple of hours, I was invited to a community meeting in Wenvo last Thursday evening because a group of residents have come together and they want to come up with some initiatives within the village to tackle climate change. And they were asking similar things, and they were looking at starting to produce something themselves as well. So perhaps we can link you up, Councillor Wilson, with the representatives in Wenvo to share some learning there. And of course, following the workshop around climate change, if there's an interest in engaging with the Vale of Glamorgan Council, I'd be very happy to come along and have a conversation about how we could do that.
Thank you.
Okay, have I got any more questions? I can't see any hands up. So if I can't see any hands and nobody waving at me, can I thank you very much for your presentation, Tom. Thank you. And move on to agenda item number 7, which I believe is being given by Karen Bowen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Thank you, everybody. This report is being presented to provide your committee with an overview of the observations that have been undertaken by independent members of the Standards Committee. And also we've taken the opportunity to give an overview of monitoring officers' meetings that have been held between the monitoring officer and clerks within town and community councils. There are 2 members of your committee tonight, Community Liaison, who are on the Standards Committee from the Vale, and I'm sure they can also chip in if they feel the need to do so. But it's really to provide you with an overview, because I know that a number of your town and community councils, I think there's only now 3 outstanding that we've not actually visited in the last 2 years, really. And it's just to provide you with an overview of what has been going on. And we've got 5 members of the Standards Committee who are independent members, and those are the members who actually undertake these observations. I mean, one of the roles, as it clearly states in the summary report, is to promote and maintain high standards of conduct by councillors, co-opted members and church and parent governor representatives of the council. Because I'm not sure if you're all entirely aware that we do have co-opted members on a number of the council's committees, and obviously our Standards Committee members are co-opted, independent. We also have a town and community council representative on the Standards Committee, which is Mr. Councillor Cuddy as well, and he's also on this committee. And the Church and Parent Governor representatives are on the Learning and Culture Scrutiny Committee, and we also have a lay member on the Audit Committee. And of course, the whole idea is really to promote and maintain standards in all areas, and including within the remit of a Standards Committee and the Monitoring Officer, town and community councils. So when we first started this process, or the committee started this process, they actually looked at Vale of Glamorgan Council meetings first of all, and then in March 2019 they extended their observations to town and community councils. If I can just deal with the first aspect first, then in relation to the observations that are undertaken by of town and community councils, then Appendix A to the report, you will see there's a pro forma which was drawn up by the monitoring officer and myself, who support the Standards Committee meeting. And then that was obviously agreed by the Standards Committee members as a checklist document that they could take to each meeting and consider those aspects. And that's what they they don't necessarily report on exactly every aspect of that observation when they report to the Standards Committee, because as you can imagine, and as I noted in the report, if you look at my last paragraph of paragraph 2.8 in the report, it's clearly stated there that to date, independent members' observations have reported that most meetings have been well managed and well run. So we don't go into the detail of, was there an agenda up on the website for every single town community council. They give an overview, of how they were and what the issues were that were raised. So the checklist is quite detailed, as you can see. They do complete it, but when an overview is given, we don't go into the actual minutiae, because in most cases that is invariably being done by all the town and community councils and the clerks who are managing, their community councils. So if I can go back to the key issues for consideration within the report, and if I can refer to paragraph 2.6 of the findings, a number of the findings that came out, it's all about sharing good practice and picking out, what's happening in other community councils, what's happening in the Vale of the community council that we can share with each other to make improvements. And for example, obviously with COVID-19, we all ended up undertaking meetings on a virtual basis, and the use of name cards and names on screens, these were comments that were made by the independent standard members, because obviously if the public are viewing, they need to distinguish between who the members are of that community council and town council, who the clerk is, and then who those are present, either observing or members of the public, whether they are virtual or whether they're attending in a physical meeting. It's important that people know who is responsible for making the decisions. Other comments that came back were relevant introductions, that the chairman actually introduced everybody so that the public who were viewing could be aware of who was around the table. There were some comments made about some meetings had long agendas and were taking some time to actually go through those agendas. So there was a suggestion of a maximum time being suggested to a town and community council and a Vale council of, maybe you want to consider, say, 2 hours maximum in dealing with business. That's something the members that we've forwarded on for people to consider. And it was the sharing of positive comments. Because we had a number, and I mean a number, of comments that came back saying the meetings were well chaired, they were well run, the chairman was inclusive, the clerk supported the meetings extremely well. So there were really good positive feedbacks. And okay, there were negative comments around managing meetings in relation to dealing with matters of Part 2 confidential matters, how these were being dealt with. There were, as I said, the comments on the sharing of introductions so that the people know who's going to be there, and some people did that better than others. So, in general, and how also the chairman managed the meeting and whether members of the town and community council were taking over then and not allowing the chairman to do their job. There were some aspects around that, but in the main, as I state in paragraph 2.8, the meetings were well managed and well run, but where there were issues and where there are issues, we bring them to the attention of the chairman and the clerk, and we have those discussions with them about ways forward, how you can move things along. And it's up to the chairman of that committee, that council, whether or not they want to report those findings to the town and community council themselves, or whether they feel they can address those issues, outside of the meeting. Some comments, I would also say, are probably better discussed in a Part 2 environment, rather than deal with them, in an open forum, because some of them are easily resolved, and it's just sharing of the good practice, really, and looking at members and the conduct issues of meetings and how you're addressing the requirements of the legislation that you work under. So really, that's just to bring you a flavour of what is being discussed and then being reported back to the Standards Committee over the months that are ongoing. We've got a few more meetings to go through in the next couple of months, and a couple more that we haven't been able to visit for various reasons. But all in all, you know, it's going really well, and it's been positively welcomed as well. So that's a good sign. We've also then undertaken monitoring officer meetings with Town and Community Council clerks. And again, part of that was in order to share good practice and also provide a formal opportunity for the clerks to discuss elements of mutual concern. So it also works as a networking meeting as well, and it's an open discussion. And we also share the generic observations with the clerks as well at those meetings, so they're all fully informed of the generic observations. Specific ones, no, we deal directly with the chairman and the clerk of those committees. I have been asked to prepare a report for the next Standards Committee on, you know, like a précis report on the observations and on how we've taken forward the suggested improvements, etc., and how those discussions have taken place with the clerk. So I will be bringing some statistics to the next Standards Committee and some more information. And if you wanted to, I could bring, you know, a further report to you, say possibly on an annual basis, if that's what you wished. I'm sure the Monitoring Office would be happy to do that. But then the meetings of the Town and Community Council clerks, the Monitoring Office commenced them in 2019, as I said, to provide a formal opportunity to discuss matters of mutual concern and, you know, to share good practice and offer guidance and support to each other, you know. So they commenced in 2019. We held two, one in March 2019, one in October 2019. And then obviously with the pandemic, we had to put those on hold, but we resumed those back on the 19th of May this year. And our next meeting then is to take place in November of this year. And again, the feedback received from the clerks has been really good. They really, you know, value those meetings. And 2.9 of my report, the Monitoring Officer's report, talks about the sort of topics that we've actually discussed. So we've talked about training and if any clerk or any council had any issues in relation to providing training for mayors, deputy mayors, chairs and vice chairs, you know, it was suggested they consider, you know, an appropriate opportunity when that takes place, because I know that some mayors remain for, you know, in that position for some time, others a change on an annual basis. So it's looking at opportunities to provide for the support for members, and particularly in relation to virtual meetings, because we know that's been a new initiative, and you know, it's an opportunity for you to consider, really. I know some of you won't have those training budgets, but it's really to think about what training may be required. How you use your standing orders to regulate your meetings. If you have any particular issues, you know, always remember that you've got standing orders and those tools to help you support the running of a meeting if you're the chairman, and also the clerk to be, you know, fully aware of those tools. We provide, you know, information in relation to support you in your role. And an example, there was a copy of a toolkit that had been prepared in England but was considered to be useful, which we circulated to members of to the clerks at Town and Community Councils. The use of the local dispute resolution procedure, we discussed the opportunities for councils to use that as and when required. You know, each community council was requested by the Ombudsman to consider a model local dispute resolution procedure for their own. We have one for the Vale of Glamorgan Council, and it was a recommendation by the Standards Committee that individual town and community councils, you know, should really look to addressing one themselves. So if they have issues within their locality that can be addressed rather than more formally through the Ombudsman process, etc., that a local dispute resolution procedure can assist in helping working relationships. Other topics, again, I've mentioned that a number of times now, sharing of good practice. We also discuss any items that clerks may wish to raise that they may have something they want to raise, or they may want to seek advice and guidance from the monitoring officer or from each other. So those opportunities are afforded. And again, we talk about the generic observations. We then advise on the visits that are likely to be taking place over the forthcoming months. And at the last meeting in May, we also had a debriefing and a discussion on the Local Government and Elections Wales Act and what that means for the Vale of Glamorgan Council and Town and Community Councils, because it is a massive piece of legislation for us all to get our heads around. And the Vale of Glamorgan, we developed an action plan, and we've got a working group that meets on a regular basis to progress the various actions in that plan. And we are happy to share that and have shared it with yourselves, the Community Liaison Committee. We've shared it with all the clerks, and we're happy to also share any progress updates that go along with that as it goes along, because a lot of the Act, we haven't had all the regulations through yet. We're still waiting for the nitty-gritty detail then of what it all means. So I think from my point of view, that covers the report, and open to questions really, if anybody has got any questions they'd like to ask me.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you, Karen. I think we would, as a committee, welcome an annual report. It would be nice to have an update. So I think we'd possibly all agree with that. And I have Councillor Shirley Hodges for a question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested about your comments about using technology in Zoom, because I think a Zoom meeting is very different to an in-person meeting. I think it's very, very difficult to debate on a Zoom meeting. I think you'd struggle to engage colleagues in a Zoom meeting and change their minds with a debate. I think it'd be very difficult because you tend to just make statements. So I don't think it aids the democratic process, and I can't wait to go back to proper meetings in a room with real people. We're lucky at the Town Council, Barry Town Council. We've been very proactive. We've had Zoom meetings. We've had very good chairs, and we've always encouraged the public to attend. We regularly have local reporters attend our public meetings. One question I was going to ask is about the local democratic reporter, who I saw on social media was extremely upset that the Vale wouldn't let him access the Vale's full council meetings. So was that true? Was the Vale stopping the public from attending its own meetings? I find it hard to believe you're commenting on the town and community councils letting the public in, but the Vale somehow didn't manage it. Was that correct? Thank you.
No, the registration to speak process continued throughout the virtual process. What we didn't have at that time was live streaming. Now we do have live streaming from the 1st of May because the hybrid solution commenced from the 1st of May. So we have live streaming from the 1st of May, and that means that any member of the public can view any meeting of the Vale of Glamorgan going forward. The registration to speak process was always available. So that was for the committees that the provision is there for. It was able to register to speak. What we didn't have at that time was the ability for the public to actually view a meeting at that time, which we do now. So from the 1st of May, that has been up and running. But as I said, the register to speak process was always available from the day we did live streaming, virtual meeting. Sorry.
Thank you, and just to confirm that all the way through we allowed the public to attend our meetings. So thank you very much for your response.
Not every meeting. That's what I was wanting to be clear on, though, because it's where those public are able to speak. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hodges. Can I have Councillor Robertson, please?
Before we go on, can I just also mention as well that all the meetings were recorded and uploaded after the meeting. prior to the 1st of May, just to be clear that, you know, everybody could see the meetings after. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that, Karen. I'm actually a member of the Standards Committee, a council member of the Standards Committee, and something which Karen obviously wasn't able to touch on particularly is how I have to say how very impressed I've been by the standard of the independent members, of their meticulous attention to detail, their knowledge of the code of conduct and all aspects of community councils. I think it is very important that the monitoring that they do should at some point come into this forum in one way or another, whether it's either on an annual basis or a half-yearly basis. But I just really thought it was important to say how very, very impressive the independent members are. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Robertson. That's good to know. Thank you. Any other questions? I can't see any hands up. So I just think this is for noting this presentation, and thank you, Karen, on your feedback and how it all sets up, because I think many of us have gone through what we feel like is an inspection. So it's good to get some feedback, and will be in the future as well. Okay.
On that point, Chair, if you wouldn't mind me coming back, I would like to say that it is it's definitely a sharing of good practice, and it's definitely opportunities for, you know, if we can raise standards in any format, that's obviously a good thing to do going forward. So and we would like to say thank you as well, because as officers who arrange these meetings, we have had a lot of excellent support from the clerks of all town and community councils, and sometimes that goes unnoticed, and it's not unnoticed, certainly by officers in the Vale. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay.
Hello, Chairman. Just to confirm, obviously with regards to Councillor Robertson, then also giving his opinion that it would be beneficial to have a report on a regular basis. I have got a recommendation here from yourself, because you also did take Karen's offer up there with regards to a regular report. I will add a recommendation for the committee proposed by yourself and seconded by Councillor Robertson, if that's okay, just that we do get an annual report on the findings of the Standards Committee. Is that okay?
Very happy to second that, Debbie.
Can I just mention that with everything ongoing at the moment, if possibly we could do this annual report after the next local government elections, because obviously we have undertaken a number of meetings, but I don't know how many going forward we'll do now in the next coming months. So if you would bear in mind, could we say, you know, sometime after the local government elections, it's possibly end of 2022, early 23 maybe?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of our meeting. I would just like to say that items for requests for consideration are, you know, we're open to having these requests. The form needs to be filled in. Can I pass you over to Amy? I think we've got 2 requests coming up in the next meeting, Amy.
That's correct, Chairman. Just to inform the committee, a request for consideration regarding brown signage has been received from Colwinston Community Council, and also a request regarding the Vale of Glamorgan's rural roads policy. That was received by Aweni and seconded by Llangarn Community Council. That is also scheduled for the 4th of October meeting. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to mention that I have received emails from both Llandow Community Council, who are represented this evening, and Welsh St Donat's, who unfortunately we don't have a rep here this evening, so I will get in contact with them. But they have got in contact with me to have a copy of the request for consideration form, but we haven't yet formally had anything through from them. So I just wanted to mention that if there are any councils that have got the form but haven't quite got them back to me, please could you do so as soon as possible, because the sooner we have it, the sooner we can go through the process of trying to have that matter considered. Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Karen, you wanted to say something?
It's only on the back of what something Amy mentioned regarding the opportunity. The next Standards Committee meeting of the Vale Council is the 15th of July, and I just thought I'd take the opportunity now to mention to all members, if you have any thoughts of making an application for dispensation, could you please get it into me as soon as you can? The agenda goes out on Friday, but we do take urgent items if dispensations are not received, you know, but at least we get them before the meeting. But if you could consider if you need to do that. And if you are in touch with your clerks, can you let your clerks know? For first thing tomorrow morning, I intend sending an email out to all clerks to remind them if they've got anyone, you know, who's thinking they might need a dispensation to apply for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So the date of the next meeting is the 4th of October 2021. And I thank you all for attending this evening. Thank you all for your questions, and say good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thank you, Chair. Good night.
Thank you very much.